a look at a youth village for child survivors 25 years after 800,000 people were murdered in the Rwandan genocide. Lack of rain in Kenya's Turkana region leaves 1 million people with severe food shortages. And in the wake of Cyclone Idai's devastation, Mozambique faces 1,000 cases of cholera as aid agencies scramble to prevent the disease from spreading. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent McCory and this is Africa 54. Now, 25 years after the tragedy of the Rwanda genocide shook the world, French President Emmanuel Macron is commissioning a 9-member panel to begin a 2-year probe into the role the French army played during the horror. France has acknowledged mistakes in its past dealings with Rwanda, but dismisses accusations that it trained militias to participate in the massacre. Rwandan President Paul Kagame has accused Paris of being complicit in the violence in which Hutu militia killed 800,000 Tutsis and moderate Hutus. Meanwhile, child survivors and orphans of the genocide are now adults. Some were held away from certain poverty when they moved to neighboring countries.
300,000 children were killed during Rwanda's brutal genocide. Hutu extremists tried to wipe out the entire Tutsi population. Men and women, old and young. 100 days of unimaginable violence. When it finished, whole families were gone, and 95,000 children were orphaned. Vicent de Paul Ruhumuriza was just a few months old at the time. His father buried in a mass grave. His mother, so traumatized by grief, she's unable to look after him.
I spoke to some people who knew her before, who have some stories. I heard that she got some troubles in the genocide. She was beaten, she was raped.
Vicent lived in poverty and was dropping out of school. But 7 years ago, he was placed in a special youth village. Hussle Shalom is based on an Israeli model, which helped heal young victims of the Holocaust. Here, 15 children live in each house, under the care and watchful eye of a mama. Vicent was cared for by Emerita Mukaru Sagara, who lost her own husband during the genocide.
Raising children in a country like this, raising children who don't know or have their mothers and fathers, helping them until they call you mum and then they become adults, makes me so proud.
With the support of his foster mum and brothers, Vicent became school president and now has a job in the construction industry. 25 years after the genocide, his life has been turned around, like 850 others who've passed through the village. The children from 1994 have grown up, but Hussle Shalom hasn't closed its doors. The charity is now helping orphans, abuse victims and refugees from nearby conflicts.
That was Reuters' Sam Holder reporting. Now, a 2-day international conference on genocide is wrapping up Friday in Kigali ahead of Sunday's 25th anniversary of the Rwandan genocide. Delegates are discussing the realities of generational shift in society that has experienced genocide, looking at lessons, challenges and threats. Another session is focused on the role of state, the church and the media in the propagation, polarization and disintegration of the social fabric of Rwanda and how it led to the genocide. Now, the forum participants are also discussing the necessity for justice in the aftermath of genocide in the context of nation building, reconciliation, and fighting impunity. Now, for more perspective on the 25th anniversary of the Rwandan genocide, I'm joined live from Kigali by Richard Sesibera. He is the Rwandan Minister of Foreign Affairs. Good evening, Minister Sesibera. Good to see you.
Good evening to you.
Yes, and now it's 25 years later, and the big conversation has been about reconciliation. How far has the country come in that process?
Well, first of all, the genocide against the Tutsi in 1994 took the lives of over 1 million people. That's 10,000 people a day, 10,000 families that were traumatized, 10,000 families that every day for 3 months, those 1 million families and more have to live with the trauma of genocide. The whole Rwandan nation has to reconcile, and is now has renewed itself. So it's been 25 years of reconstruction, 25 years of the determination to make sure that Rwandans and the Rwandan nation is rebuilt in its entirety, in its humanity, and aims at prosperity. And this has been a journey that is ongoing. We've achieved some successes. There is a lot of work still to be done, but we're on the right path.
Now, we've run some profiles of people who, of course, experienced this, and you can see the pain. For some, you can see the pain is still present, and there was always that question of justice, and Gacaca was put in place to do that. Do you feel that many people feel justice has also been done, even as they try to heal over the years?
Of justice was difficult. Rwanda has done everything possible. The survivors of genocide, but also deal with reconciliation. Millions of perpetrators. They have some of them have confessed their sins and been rehabilitated into society. So yes, justice for Rwanda has been a journey. On the other hand, for the international community, I think there's been some injustice in the justice provided. Lots of resources, over $1 billion spent judging only 60 people, compared to the resources that were available to the Rwandan government. And we still have many perpetrators of genocide across Europe and the United States and everywhere who have not been extradited to face justice in Rwanda or been prosecuted where they are, and that certainly still is an injustice.
Dr. Sezibera, there have also been concerns about the politicization of the whole issue, that it becomes a bit difficult sometimes to have a conversation. For some people feel that they may be labeled something like, for example, genocide denier. How are you dealing with that?
It cannot be politics. The 10,000 people who died every day have names, they have faces, they have people who killed them. That is not politics. That is mass murder. That is genocide. And those who deny it, those who try to revise it, are either accomplices or enablers of the genocidal project, because the genocidal project has in itself, in its conception, the possibility for denial, the possibility for revision. And therefore, this has nothing to do with politics. It has everything to do with humanity and making sure that those who lost their humanity and killed humanity have their day in court.
Well, Minister Sezibera, thank you very much for taking time to appear in Africa 54. That's Richard Sezibera, who is the Rwandan Minister of Foreign Affairs. Now, as the world marks the 25th anniversary of the Rwandan genocide on Sunday, April the 7th, we are bringing you the moving stories of those who lived through one of the darkest periods of African and world history. In today's installment of our Survivor series, ordinary Rwandans share their stories of loss, survival, and hope for their country. This is Innocent Kabirizi's story, rather.
The night of April 6th to 7th, when Habyarimana's plane crashed, In the morning, local leaders gave orders that no one should go out. They ordered us all to stay at home. Massacres here at Nyamirabu started on the 7th. In Herahamwe, militia launched their attacks with guns and grenades. We then decided that whoever could had to run into Gishwari forest. Some of us managed to run away and escaped, but others were killed on the spot. There were some who were killed along the way or inside Gishwari forest. Others were killed in the valley trying to cross the border. The first reason is that they remind me friends of my generation and classmates, some of whom were killed in my presence, others were killed elsewhere that I do not know. The other reason is that some members of my family too were killed in that first attack on the 7th. Though I was running, I saw how they killed them. We even tried to come back to bury them in the night, but we could not find them as their bodies were thrown in mass graves or latrines. Since 1994, after the genocide, I encountered many problems. I was in distress every day when I thought about relatives or neighbors that we lost. I had a family of 8 people, but none of them survived except me and my sister that you see sitting here. My children are in school. They are in their final year now. Though my relatives were exterminated, I managed to pay school for my children using the piece of land as well as caring for my family. I forgave someone, the one who took part in hunting me. I forgave him and we have reconciled. He's now a friend of mine and pays me visits. Here in Kanzenze, we have achieved unity and reconciliation, and all Gachacha court's cases were completed. But for me in particular, I have forgiven the one who got involved in exterminating my family. We visit each other, we share everything. I even employ him in VIUP works.
Well, to the south of the continent, Mozambique is facing 1,000 cases of cholera stemming from the storm surge flooding from Cyclone Idai that contaminated wells with sewage. As the disease soars, VOA's Brian Patton reports international relief organizations are scrambling to prevent a deadly epidemic in the impoverished country where the storm's death toll is already over 800, with thousands more displaced and many in desperate need of emergency aid.
The floodwaters from Cyclone Idai have mostly receded in the Mozambican city of Beira. It was hardest hit by the storm but has left behind hundreds of contaminated wells in the neighborhood of Manyaba. The American relief organization Samaritan's Purse has recently begun sanitizing these wells that are a likely source of the recent cholera outbreak here.
There's endemic cholera in this area, and there's been a few actual positive cases here at the Manyava Hospital, just a block over that way.
Cholera is a stomach virus spread often by contaminated water sources and can be deadly if not treated in its early stages. Humanitarian organizations, including Doctors Without Borders and the International Red Cross, have set up health clinics to treat the rising number of cholera cases. The World Health Organization has shipped more than 900,000 doses of cholera vaccines, and the U.S. Agency for International Development is also financially supporting the vaccination campaign as part of its $7 million contribution to disaster assistance.
The Ministry of Health is leading the efforts in ensuring that the communities where there's a possible risk of this particular diarrheal illness coming to affect the community, that there's an opportunity for people to receive the vaccine ahead of being exposed.
Sanitizing one contaminated well can reduce the risk of infection for an entire neighborhood.
We have more than 200 people who use this well from all over this area.
But it is a labor-intensive process where workers first pump out contaminated water, then treat the well with a powerful chlorine agent to kill harmful bacteria. The next day, the well is again pumped to dilute the chlorine.
We are not going to clean all the wells, but those that are most used by population, those that have provided good water in the past.
Despite the surge of international assistance, the cholera situation remains difficult to contain in a country with already widespread poverty and still facing a long recovery from the extensive cyclone damage. Brian Padden, VOA News, Beira.
In East Africa, the Kenyan government and aid agencies are distributing food in drought-stricken parts of the country where a hunger crisis has left 1 million hungry and in dire need of food. In Kenya's northern regions such as Turkana and Garissa, nothing is growing. The lack of rain is causing crops to fail while triggering conflicts between herders over scarce water and pasture. Most residents in the nation's upper northern region are surviving only on 1 meal a day, if at all. After an outcry from prominent Kenyans, the government has begun emergency food aid. Turkana residents usually don't keep money. Their savings are in their livestock. Following a similar drought in 2017, they are now being encouraged to invest in crops as well. Kenya is hit by drought every few years and a struggle to prevent hunger despite numerous projects to bolster people living in arid lands who traditionally depend on livestock.
The current drought is still ongoing. It is still severe, and therefore the population is still being affected. The relief food through the county government is continuing.
Media have reported deaths linked to a lack of food in some counties, but Kenyan government officials say they have not confirmed reports associated with that drought. Now, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres is in Libya trying to push an international peace deal. He says he is shocked by the suffering of migrants living in detention centers. Following a visit to the Ain Zara detention center, where 4,000 migrants are being housed, the UN chief tweeted, and I quote, "I am deeply shocked and moved by the suffering and despair I have seen in this detention center in Tripoli, where migrants and refugees are in detention for unlimited time and without any hope to regain their lives." Guterres says migrants and refugees are not only Libya's responsibility, but that of the whole international community. Libya is a leading departure point in North Africa for migrants attempting to cross the Mediterranean Sea to Europe. Most migrants are jailed after being intercepted in their substandard boats by the Libyan Coast Guard. The United States is revoking the entry visa of the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, Fatou Bensouda. That's according to our office. The move appears to be a response to her inquiry into possible war crimes by U.S. forces in Afghanistan. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said last month America would withdraw or deny visas to ICC staff investigating such allegations against U.S. forces or their allies. UN human rights experts are calling the reaction improper interference in the work of the world's permanent war crimes court. It also drew criticism from within the European Union. The ICC is not a UN court, but Bensouda travels regularly to the U.S. to brief the UN Security Council on cases referred to the Hague by the world body. Now, the Mo Ibrahim Foundation is holding its annual flagship event, the Ibrahim Governance Weekend, Friday through Sunday in Abidjan, Côte d'Ivoire. The 2019 forum is focusing on African migration. To tell us more about it, I'm joined live via Skype by Jay Naidu, a board member of the Mo Ibrahim Foundation. Good evening, Mr. Naidu.
Good evening, Vincent.
Yes. Now, first, you say migration, according to your report, is about aspirations and not desperation. However, we see a great number of those who actually try to cross the Mediterranean to Europe say that things are so bad in their country that they're willing to risk dying on the Mediterranean than stay in their country. How do you explain that?
Well, that's why we're having this particular focus on migration. You know, it is to present us with an opportunity to look at the continent's development that can only be realized if we really look at the data and have a clear understanding of the facts. So if you look at 2017, there have been close to 30 million people involved in global migration. Of that, Africa only accounted for 14%. Asia 41%, and Europe 24%. So if you're looking from 2009 to 2017, the number of migrants globally now have just increased from about 3.4% of the global population from 2.9%. So, and 70% of African migration takes place inside the continent. So when you see pictures of poor people in overcrowded, leaky, and very boats that are just, very vulnerable, and people drowning in it, of course, that is what is imprinted on the global mind. It is not the reality.
But
in fact, most of, yes.
Very quickly, I wanted to ask you, do you get the sense that African governments are doing anything very specific to not stop people from going, but to have a situation where people don't necessarily risk their lives to just get out of their countries?
Oh, absolutely. We have to recognize that for many young people, and most of the people leaving Africa are young, both men and women, and very educated and entrepreneurial. These are people that go to countries, and when they arrive, they add to growing the GDP and entrepreneurial and business opportunities of those countries. So we are losing the best talent in our continent, and largely because they believe there's a glass ceiling over their heads. And because of corruption, because of nepotism, because of tribalism, because of conflict, and now increasingly because of climate change. So I think governments have a central role in making sure we create an enabling environment that takes the assets of Africa, which are tremendous assets. We have 60% of the remaining cultivatable, arable land in the world, yet we are the epicenter of hunger. If we just did something as government to support subsistence farmers who are mainly women, become smallholder farmers, we could feed Africa and feed the world. Same thing applies in terms of the solar energy. If we went away from our addiction to coal and moved towards solar, we could create a tremendous industry. I was the Minister of Communications in the Mandela government when sub-Saharan Africa had less phones than the city of New York. And yet, look at what's happened.
Well, great potential on the continent. We hope for the best. Mr. Naidu, thank you very much. We do appreciate your insights. That's Jay Naidu, is a board member of the Mo Ibrahim Foundation. On a rather somber note, people gathered here in Washington for a candlelight vigil to remember the life and legacy of the late rapper Nipsey Hussle, who was shot and killed on March 31st. Viewers Tawalda Tesfagabir and Abi's son attended the ceremony, and Salim Solomon reports.
If any proof was needed of the impact of rapper Nipsey Hussle, it could be found among the people who gathered for a candlelight vigil in Washington, D.C. Many felt a strong kinship with the musician who was born Ermias Asghedom because of his music, his message, and his life story as a son of an Eritrean father and an African-American mother. He was gunned down in Los Angeles on Sunday at the clothing store he opened in South Central Los Angeles neighborhood.
He used his culture, he used his influence towards bettering people's lives, not only the people he was around, but the whole city of Los Angeles. And I feel like, when somebody loses their life like that, that has impact on a global scale, you have to pay your respects and you have to show him love, man. He didn't deserve that, man.
The vigil at the Washington's Malcolm X Park was organized by members of the Eritrean diaspora. Many at the park said they felt particularly close to the rapper because he had embraced his heritage and gave Eritrean Americans a positive role model to admire.
It inspired me a lot of things, you know what I mean? He made me care about my country more, you know what I'm saying? He did help a lot of people, you know what I'm saying? He did a lot of things people don't expect. This guy come from nothing, you know what I mean? He made it to the top. So, somebody taking, someone from us, got hurt. But you know what I mean? God is always taking the good one.
Others focused on the fact that he had given so much back to his impoverished inner city community in Los Angeles. He had launched a clothing line, opened a barbershop, fish market, burger restaurant, and a workspace to help revitalize the neighborhood. He had plans to build low-income housing as well.
He didn't use rap as a way to get rich. He tried to show people another way to get rich, tried to show people another way to make money in a legitimate way without having to go, through the illegal means of doing things, and pretty much just trying to bring the hood up from being oppressed like we are. It's difficult for us in every type of way possible, and he's seen that, and he's seen another way. So
some pledged to continue his legacy and celebrate the life he lived and those he inspired.
We here for you, baby. That's it. We're here for you. We're going to celebrate. There's some unfinished business that you had for us, but we're going to finish it. Our generation is going to do better. Everything is for you, okay?
For Tawalda Tisfagaber and Abi San, Salam Salomon, VOA News, Washington, D.C.
Well, we end tonight's broadcast with the music of Togolese artist Dogo. The song is Soke Wong, which means forgive. From all of us in Washington, have a good evening and a great weekend.